Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. A peaceful Christmas Eve suddenly turned into a nightmare when a happy American family received devastating news. Their young daughter had been kidnapped. The only clue was a strange, threatening ransom note. However, as hope for a miracle began to fade, the lifeless body of the little girl was unexpectedly discovered right in their own home. This mysterious death became the center of public and media attention, marking the beginning of a multi-year investigation. Although all family members became suspects, the truth behind the Child Beauty Queen case remains an unanswered question. Situated east of the majestic Rocky Mountains, Colorado, with an impressive average elevation of 6,800 feet, 2,072 meters, is one of the highest states in the United States. Its capital, Denver, with its clean air and beautiful natural landscapes, is always an attractive destination for tourists. Not far from Denver, in the peaceful city of Boulder, lived a family of 4 enjoying a prosperous and happy life. The father, a successful businessman and talented writer, together with the gentle, dedicated mother, created an ideal home for their 2 children. The 9-year-old son, smart and lively, and the 6-year-old daughter, beautiful and adorable, were the pride of the family. On Christmas Eve, 1996, the festive atmosphere enveloped the Ramsey family. After a cozy party, everyone returned home, each looking forward to a good night's sleep. However, that night harbored a horrific secret. The next morning, as dawn crept into the house, the mother, Patsy, discovered a strange letter on the stairs. Its scrawled lines contained brutal threats, signaling an impending tragedy. Their beloved 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet, had mysteriously vanished. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, in August 1990, JonBenet Ramsey had a serene childhood with her family. When she was just 1 year old, her family moved to Boulder, Colorado to start a new life. From a young age, JonBenet displayed artistic talent and natural beauty. With bright eyes, a radiant smile, and golden hair, she quickly became the center of attention. Her talents were affirmed through numerous beauty pageants, where she continuously won prestigious titles such as Colorado Little Miss, Colorado Children's Magazine Cover Girl, America's Royal Miss, and National Little Mississippi. From an early age, JonBenet showed exceptional performance skills. Under the loving guidance of her mother, who was once Miss West Virginia, Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet soon demonstrated her talent in the fashion world. She loved posing in front of mirrors, selecting outfits, and performing graceful walks. With her mother's enthusiastic support, JonBenet confidently entered beauty contests and quickly established her position in the child modeling scene. On the morning of December 26th, the phone rang, disrupting the calm air of 715th Street, Boulder. Patsy Ramsey, with a pale face and a choked voice, reported her daughter missing. When 2 police officers arrived at the scene, a 2-story red brick house with a gray roof, it was enveloped in a gloomy atmosphere. Inside, Patsy sat huddled on the sofa, her eyes swollen from crying. The house, once full of laughter, now felt eerily silent. Every room was thoroughly searched, but the only evidence left was a slightly open window and a mysterious ransom note. News of JonBenet's disappearance spread quickly, drawing the attention of the media. Reporters from all over flocked to the Ramsey family home, making the atmosphere even more tense. To preserve the crime scene, the police cordoned off JonBenet's bedroom, which held many secrets. As time ticked away, no new leads were found. John Ramsey, in desperation, along with a friend, searched every nook and cranny of the house. In the basement, they found a broken window and a suitcase placed below it. This detail only increased suspicions of a break-in. However, John affirmed he had closed that window earlier. Afterward, the 2 entered the last room in the basement, a dark and damp storage area. The door to this room was locked from the outside, and John had to remove a wooden bar to open it. In the dim light, a horrifying scene unfolded before them. In the damp darkness, John and his friend discovered JonBenet curled up on the cold concrete floor. Her pretty mouth was taped with black duct tape, her eyes shut, and around her neck was a tightly knotted rope. John was frozen in shock, his heart squeezed tight. With trembling hands, he tried to remove the tape from his daughter's mouth, but it was all too late. The image of JonBenet's cold, small body lying between the warm fireplace and the gloriously decorated Christmas tree made everyone present tear up. John and Patsy, JonBenet's parents, sat beside their daughter, heads bowed in sobs. John gripped her hand, praying to God for her to come back to life. Those around also bowed their heads in prayer, sharing in the family's grief. Initially, the case was reported as a child kidnapping, creating an atmosphere of tension and hope. However, when JonBenet was found dead in the basement of their own home, everything became darker and more complicated. With the presence of numerous friends, relatives, and reporters, the crime scene was quickly and severely disturbed, complicating the investigation. The ransom note, the only initial clue, had been handled by many, blurring important evidence. The demand in the letter was very specific, $100,000, consisting of 100 to 100 bills and 18 to 20 bills. This number suspiciously matched the Christmas bonus the father had received, leading police to suspect the perpetrator might be someone familiar with the family and aware of their financial details. The discovery of the body nearly 8 hours after the report further complicated finding the real perpetrator, as many crucial traces might have been obscured or tampered with. Moreover, the ransom note was written on paper and with a pen found in the Ramsey house, raising suspicions of a staged scenario. The content of the letter was excessively long, when it could have been much more concise. Even more suspicious were the basic spelling errors, like possession being misspelled, suggesting an intent to portray a foreign mastermind. However, the use of complex words like attaché was spelled correctly, including the accent, making the story even more ambiguous. The ransom note not only contained strange spelling errors, but also had peculiar emphases. The emphasis on certain letters, usually overlooked in typical texts, added to the uniqueness of the note. Normally, ransom notes are short and to the point, the less information the better. Yet, this letter delved into specifics, even claiming to be from a small foreign faction. The contradiction between the emphasis on professionalism through punctuation and the self-deprecation of the organization's size made the letter even more confusing and suspicious. The ransom note was full of unusual points. The use of account instead of bank was an odd linguistic choice, not typical of ransom communication. Additionally, the repetitive use of the first-person pronoun I in the letter further muddled the identity of the sender. The mysterious signature SBTC at the end made the case even more complex. Technical analysis revealed a notable detail. The paper and pen used to write the note belonged to the victim's family. This suggested that the perpetrator might have been in the house and wrote the letter before committing the crime. On the night of the crime, only 4 people were present in the house: John Bonnet, her parents, and her brother, Burke. This made all family members suspects. The police gathered a substantial amount of evidence from the scene, including fingerprints, blood samples, handwriting, and hair samples from all family members. The autopsy results showed that John Bonnet had suffered a brutal attack. Deep marks on her neck and an 8-inch fracture on her skull indicated the use of significant force by the perpetrator. Additionally, small burns on her cheeks and back suggested the use of some kind of stun gun. The primary cause of John Bonnet's death was asphyxiation and severe brain trauma. According to forensic experts, the time of the crime was determined to be that very night. Patsy Ramsey, John Bonnet's mother, stated that she discovered the ransom note early the morning after the incident. This raises questions about the effectiveness of the initial investigation. Had the police thoroughly searched the entire house from the start, they might have found John Bonnet sooner, potentially saving her life. However, due to the thin staffing and an underestimation of the case's severity, the golden opportunity to rescue John Bonnet was missed. The delay in securing the crime scene led to the disturbance of crucial evidence, complicating the investigation and raising doubts about the capabilities of the authorities. During the crime scene examination, the police found a flashlight in the kitchen, an item that could have been used as the weapon causing the severe head injury to John Bonnet. This theory became more significant when both John and Patsy denied owning the flashlight. The marks on John Bonnet's body also revealed anomalies. The neck ligature wasn't clear, and the duct tape on her mouth showed no signs of struggle, suggesting these signs might have been staged after she had lost consciousness. This led to suspicions that the perpetrator might have deliberately arranged the scene to mimic a kidnapping to mislead the investigation. Notably, the deep neck ligature might have been created to mask the fatal head injury. The autopsy report disclosed concerning details. Signs of abrasion and congestion in John Bonnet's genital area, although no semen was found, still raised questions about possible molestation. Additionally, The presence of undigested pineapple in her stomach indicated she had eaten this fruit about 2 hours before her death. Coincidentally, on the kitchen table where the ransom note was found, there was a bowl of pineapple with fingerprints from both Patsy and Burke. Nearby, a glass of tea that had been drunk bore Burke's fingerprints. However, both John and Patsy denied giving John Bonnet pineapple that day and claimed Burke had slept through the night. The contradictions in the testimonies combined with the physical evidence made the Ramsey family the center of suspicion. The behavior of family members also drew attention. One officer noted that Patsy seemed extremely agitated, while John was unusually calm in the emergency. Moreover, the family's attitude towards the ransom note was suspicious, as they did not appear overly concerned about waiting for a call from the kidnapper, as if they already knew it wouldn't come. The police increasingly suspected John Bonnet's parents. With the kidnapping information entirely based on the family's statements, while the victim's body was found in their own home, many questions were raised. Furthermore, the handwriting on the ransom note had many similarities to Patsy's handwriting, and the paper was from her personal notepad, which further solidified these suspicions. Another notable detail was a neighbor's testimony about hearing a girl scream the night of the crime. This not only added to the mystery, but also contradicted the Ramsey family's claim that they heard no unusual noises. The complexity of the case, along with conflicting evidence, has led to ongoing debates among the public and media regarding the true identity of the perpetrator. After the crime, the behavior of the Ramsey couple raised further suspicions. Instead of cooperating with the police, they chose to appear on television just days after the incident. During the interview, Patsy used the phrase "that girl" to refer to her own daughter, a cold and emotionally detached way to speak. John and Patsy explained that they felt treated as prime suspects from the outset, and believed the police were not focusing on finding the real perpetrator. Therefore, they decided to hire lawyers and declined to cooperate with the investigation. 4 months after the crime, the Ramsey couple finally agreed to go to the police station for questioning. Patsy stated that after the Christmas party, John Bonnet had gone to bed without eating any snacks, contradicting the autopsy findings which showed pineapple in her stomach. The police hypothesized that, exhausted from the busy days leading up to Christmas, Patsy might have been irritated when John Bonnet wet the bed, a recurring issue. In a fit of anger, Patsy might have taken John Bonnet for a bath and accidentally caused her injuries. To cover up the incident, both parents might have staged the scene, including the strangulation and writing the ransom note. However, this was just one of many theories put forward, and there was no compelling scientific evidence to convict the Ramseys. Meanwhile, local prosecutors leaned towards the theory that this was an intentional killing by an outsider. They argued that the ransom note, although bearing similarities to Patsy Ramsey's handwriting, did not provide enough evidence to conclude she was the perpetrator. Handwriting analysis experts pointed out significant differences, making this theory more ambiguous. Additionally, the discovery of an unknown footprint at the scene, not matching any family member, strengthened the intruder hypothesis. However, this trace was not clear enough to determine the identity of the killer. The Ramsey house had numerous windows, making it easy for an intruder to break in. Some believe that after sneaking into the house, the perpetrator used a stun gun to subdue Jean Benet, before taking her to the basement and killing her. The use of a stun gun, an uncommon weapon, along with targeting such a young girl, led many to suspect this was a deliberate act of murder, intended to instill fear in the community. However, this theory remains unclear, and is still debated among investigators. A year and a half after the crime, an unexpected development stirred public interest when closing the investigation. The reason given was a lack of compelling evidence and suspicions of external interference. Many believed that the Ramsey family had influenced the prosecutors, leading to an investigation that was not objective. At the time, Jean Benet Ramsey, the 6-year-old child beauty queen, often appeared on stage in mature and suggestive outfits, prompting questions about whether she was the target of those with malicious intent. This theory became more convincing given the murder occurred in a small community where everyone knew each other. However, this was one of many theories, without any specific evidence to support it. A detailed analysis of Patsy Ramsey's call to the police revealed unusual details. The call ended abruptly after she repeatedly urged the police to hurry up. Notably, the call didn't actually disconnect, leaving a small recording where strange sounds could be heard. Some claim that in this recording you might hear Burke Ramsey, the couple's son, speaking. However, due to the poor audio quality, analyzing this recording proved extremely challenging. Audio experts used various tools to process the recording, but the results were still ambiguous and controversial. Each analysis version presented different content, possibly just random noises. Thus, decoding this recording is merely speculative and cannot be considered definitive evidence to incriminate anyone. The ambiguity of the recording adds complexity to the case and heightens public curiosity about what happened in the Ramsey home that night. According to the investigation, on the night of the crime, besides John Bonet, only her parents and brother were present in the house. Patsy Ramsey insisted that before the police arrived, her son Burke was in his bedroom and never left it. Burke later confirmed this statement during subsequent interrogations. He mentioned hearing some strange noises that night, but was too tired to check them out. One of the most contentious theories about the John Bonet Ramsey case is that Burke Ramsey was the perpetrator. The motive might have stemmed from jealousy over John Bonet receiving too much attention from their parents. Previous conflicts between the siblings, including an incident where Burke hit John Bonet with a golf club, further supported this theory. On the night of the crime, after attending a Christmas party, John Bonet ate a piece of pineapple before going to bed, which reportedly angered Burke, leading him to attack her with a flashlight. To cover up the crime, the Ramsey family staged a fake scene, including crafting a ransom note and using a garrote made from a paintbrush handle to strangle John Bonet. The use of such a tool indicates the perpetrator had some strength, consistent with Burke's age and physique. However, this theory still has many unresolved points and remains controversial. The idea that a 9-year-old could commit such a brutal act is hard to believe, and there's no direct physical evidence linking Burke to the crime. Another piece of physical evidence found at the scene was a broken paintbrush handle in the bathtub. This detail suggests the killer tried to erase evidence after the act. Although there's no direct evidence concluding Burke did this, the coincidence of finding the paintbrush handle used as a garrote and the broken part in the bathtub is noteworthy. The police interrogated Burke several times. In the video recordings of these interrogations, Burke's behavior caught public attention. He displayed unusual behaviors, like excessive hyperactivity and an inability to sit still. This could be due to some emotional disorders from childhood, or might indicate stress and anxiety when facing police questions. In a video recording of the interrogation, Burke's reaction when shown a photo of the pineapple bowl was particularly notable. The boy seemed to immediately recognize it as the one from his own home, and fell silent, focusing intently on it. This sudden change in emotion led many to suspect that Burke had been coached beforehand not to disclose information related to the pineapple bowl. His fingerprints were also found on the bowl and the glass beside it, further fueling these suspicions. Despite these suspicious signs, confirming Burke as the perpetrator remains contentious. It's possible that Burke was simply anxious and scared when facing the police, or he might have been trying to hide a truth unrelated to the crime itself. Moreover, the theory that Burke's parents staged the scene and framed their son also faces significant challenges in finding concrete evidence. The idea that parents could harm their own child is hard to accept. If John Bonet had truly fallen in the bathtub, the natural reaction of any parent would be to save their child, not to cover up the incident and devise a complex plan to blame someone else. Therefore, while there are many questions surrounding Burke, there isn't enough evidence to conclude he was the killer. 7 years after the gruesome murder, a breakthrough was made thanks to advanced DNA technology. Forensic scientists discovered the DNA trace of an unknown man on John Bonet's underwear. The analysis results showed that this DNA did not match any member of the Ramsey family, thereby ruling out their direct involvement in the crime. However, public skepticism and criticism of the family did not cease. A new suspect came into the police's view, Bill McReynolds, who had dressed up as Santa Claus and visited the Ramsey home 2 days before the murder. Notably, Bill's daughter had been kidnapped 22 years earlier, and his wife had written a script about children being molested and killed in a basement. However, despite these suspicious coincidences, there was no direct evidence to conclude Bill McReynolds was the killer. On the contrary, many considered him a kind-hearted man, particularly valuing the gift John Bonet had given him. The John Bonet Ramsey case continued to shock when a new suspect, Oliva, was arrested for smuggling. Notably, in Oliva's backpack, the police found a photo of John Bonet. Additionally, a schoolmate of Oliva revealed that on the night of the crime, Oliva had called and confessed to having harmed a little girl. However, DNA testing results showed that Aliva's DNA did not match the traces found at the scene. In another unexpected turn, a 41-year-old man named John Markar confessed to being responsible for JonBenet's murder. John Markar claimed he had snuck into the Ramsey home on Christmas night with ill intent towards the girl. However, when morning came, he panicked and accidentally caused her death. The police found a flashlight in the kitchen, believed to be the tool John Markar used to commit the crime. The JonBenet Ramsey case continued to unfold in unpredictable ways. Although John Markar confessed to the crime, scientific evidence did not support his confession. DNA tests revealed that his DNA did not match any traces found at the scene. Moreover, his description of the crime scene did not align with what the police had documented. Notably, at the time of the crime, he was in Georgia, not Colorado. Given these contradictions, John Markar was removed from the suspect list and released. In the same year, the Ramsey family suffered a significant loss when Patsy passed away from ovarian cancer. She was buried next to her daughter, closing a painful chapter in the family's life. A new twist emerged in 2016 when forensic experts, including the renowned Chinese detective Li Chongyu, proposed a bold theory. They suggested that the DNA traces found on JonBenet's underwear might not belong to the perpetrator, but could simply be a result of the manufacturing process. Experiments conducted on new clothing verified this possibility. Additionally, a stun gun was found at the scene, but analysis showed it was not powerful enough to incapacitate an adult, raising questions about its use in the crime. These new findings have made the case more complex than ever. If the DNA evidence isn't the most crucial clue, then finding the true perpetrator becomes even more challenging. To this day, the JonBenet Ramsey case remains an unsolved mystery, leaving much regret for the family and the public. However, with the continuous development of technology, especially in DNA databases, there's hope that one day the truth will be revealed. Story 2. On October 16, 2022, at 12:56 p.m., a 911 operator received an unusual call. On the other end, there were continuous, indistinct moans. The operator soon realized that the sounds over the phone might be from a woman whose mouth was gagged, unable to speak clearly. The background noise suggested a struggle was taking place. Immediately, the operator began tracing the call's origin and informed the caller, getting a faint yes in response before the sound faded away. The operator quickly contacted the police to investigate. Soon after, the sounds from the phone weakened until silence prevailed, but the call remained connected, with no further sounds heard. What had happened to this woman? The incident occurred on October 16, 2022, in Lacey, a suburb of Thurston County in Washington State, on the west coast of the USA. This small town usually has just over 50,000 residents, surrounded by mountains and forests. Lacey lies on a plain facing the sea, with mountains behind it. Thanks to the Federal Highway Network, life here is convenient, combined with the pristine nature to create a harmonious and happy lifestyle. Chai Kyung-on, aged 53, and Young Suk-on, aged 42, were a Korean couple. They had 2 children, a 20-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. The family of 4 lived in a peaceful neighborhood in Lacey. Life seemed to flow smoothly until disaster struck. In the summer of 2022, due to domestic violence, Young Suk-on filed for divorce. The couple began living separately, with Chai Kyung-on moving out as they prepared for the divorce. Thus, only Young Suk-on and the 2 children remained in the house. Chai Kyung-on would return once a week to wash clothes and visit his children. Around 12:30 p.m. on October 16, 2022, when Young Suk-on and her children returned from church, they saw Chai Kyung-on's small truck parked outside. This was not unusual. She assumed he was back to do laundry after a week of work. Compared to before, meeting once a week was much better for Young Suk-on. On this occasion, they planned to discuss their divorce. Young Suk-on sent her children to the grocery store so she could talk with her husband in private. However, as soon as the conversation started, a heated argument erupted over property division, with neither willing to yield. Chai Kyung-on, in his anger, shouted, while Young Suk-on, accustomed to years of arguing, didn't realize how intense this disagreement had become. In her frustration, she told her husband to leave and go far away. After arguing with her husband, Young Suk-on, feeling exhausted, went upstairs to the bedroom. She didn't notice that her husband followed her. Once in the bedroom, he physically confronted her, then taped her mouth, blindfolded her, and bound her hands and feet before leaving. At this point, young Sukon was terrified, her mind racing with one thought. This man has gone mad. In her panic, she remembered the smartwatch on her wrist, quickly sending an emergency alert to a friend and her daughter, then calling 911 for help. Although she couldn't speak due to the tape over her mouth, this was her only chance for rescue. Just as the police were responding to the alert and heading to the scene, unfortunately for young Sukon, Chai Kyung-on returned. Surveillance footage from across the showed him driving into the garage. He then dragged young Sukon from the bedroom to downstairs. At that moment, he noticed her smartwatch was still connected to 911. Realizing the danger, he smashed it with a hammer to destroy it. He then forced her to swallow an unidentified pill and dragged her into the truck's trunk. Surveillance video revealed that Chai Kyung-on's truck and the police car passed each other going opposite directions. Both were speeding, but the police did not stop Chai Kyung-on's vehicle since they needed to get to young Sukon's house as quickly as possible, where her watch had signaled for help. This allowed Chai Kyung-on's truck to easily leave the neighborhood and head towards the forest. When the police arrived at young Sukon's house, they were unsure of what was happening. Was it a robbery, kidnapping, or murder? They called out and shouted at the door, but there was no response. On the garage floor lay young Sukon's smartwatch, still connected to the 911 operator. Upon discovering this, the police realized this was the device the victim had used to call for help. The house was empty, the front door and garage wide open, with clear signs of a struggle inside. At that moment, the children returned from the grocery store, and seeing a group of police at their home with both parents missing, they had a bad feeling. After talking with the police, the older daughter mentioned that 30 minutes earlier, their mother had sent them to the store because she had something important to discuss with their father. Shortly after, she received an urgent distress message from her mother. On their way back, they clearly saw their father's car out leaving. During the verification process, the police discovered that young Suk-on had reported domestic abuse several times. Her husband, Chai Kyung-on, was the perpetrator. He had even been issued a no-contact order, but it was later revoked by the court. The police canvassed the neighborhood and retrieved some surveillance footage. The speeding truck was driven by Chai Kyung-on, heading towards a long forested road. The small truck had traveled 11 kilometers from the starting point into a rather desolate area. Chai Kyung-on found a suitable spot, stopped the vehicle, and dragged young Suk-on out. At that moment, she felt a sharp knife pierce her, which cleared her mind after being forced to take a pill by her husband. She then noticed her surroundings and realized she was in a remote suburban area. In front of her was the silhouette of a man holding a shovel, his face towards the ground, his back to the sky. The hole he was digging grew larger before her eyes. Once the hole was the size he wanted, Chai Kyung-on pulled his wife into it. He believed that with the pill he had given her and the wound he inflicted, she wouldn't be able to fight or escape. Moreover, once the hole was filled, she would surely suffocate. However, at this moment, young Suk-on was still quite conscious. She knew she couldn't escape due to the tape tightly binding her wrists and ankles. She began to feel the dirt falling on her body and face, only able to turn her head slightly to ensure the dirt didn't completely block her nose. Fortunately, Chai Kyung-on didn't notice her slight movements. Not long after, something heavier unexpectedly landed on her, branches that Chai Kyung-on placed on top of the soil covering her. After finishing, he returned to the truck. Young Suk-on was nearly buried alive, surviving only with the air seeping through loose soil. As she heard the truck's engine start, she began to twist her body, trying to free her hands from the tape, then remove the tape from her eyes, mouth, and legs. This process could take hours, since she couldn't make large or continuous movements. Since Chai Kyung-on's truck was still there, he might be in the vehicle, so she acted cautiously to avoid detection. She slowly moved out of the hole, peeked out, and saw the truck's windows fogged up with a light inside, surrounded by darkness. No longer able to delay because of her worsening injury, young Suk-on used all her strength to push aside the branches and climb out. She then ran back along the road opposite the truck's direction. About 30 minutes later, at 12:52 a.m., she saw a house. Unable to think further, she knocked on the door for help. When she recounted what had happened, the family initially didn't believe her, but seeing her pitiful state, they helped her call the police. When the police arrived, young Suk-on was hiding behind the house. Seeing the police, she rushed out, screaming for help. Medical personnel treated her wounds, cleaned her up, and took her to the hospital. At 7:38 a.m. on October 17th, A resident walking on a small road spotted Chai Kyung-on's green truck, which the police were looking for, near Stedman Road. The police acted swiftly. Only 44 minutes later, the suspect Chai Kyung-on was arrested. After confirming his mental and physical health were not issues, he was detained in Thurston County Jail to await trial. That evening, the police inspected the scene where Young Suk-on was buried. A 1.6 meter long, 0.7 meter wide, and 0.5 meter deep hole near Stedman Road. Other holes with signs of digging from within, along with tape, hair, and blood, were found at the scene. A piece of tape was stuck to the edge of Young Suk-on's broken smartwatch. At the investigation office, Young Suk-on stated that her husband had repeatedly threatened her, saying he'd rather kill her than give her his pension. The prosecutor then charged Chai Kyung-on with attempted murder, domestic violence, abduction at the highest degree, assault, and severe harassment. The assistant prosecutor requested the court deny bail for Chai Kyung-on. Young Suk-on, through her attorney, also requested that no bail be granted, citing her fear for her safety, believing he would come after her if released. Young Suk-on's defense attorney suggested setting bail at $15,000, a sum high enough to prevent Chai Kyung-on from being bailed out. Few knew that he was a former intelligence officer with 30 years of service in the U.S., with no prior criminal record. He might have faced significant psychological pressure during his service, which could be an objective reason for his crimes, but this was Young Suk-on's greatest concern. She feared Chai Kyung-on would seek revenge if released. Ultimately, the court agreed with Young Suk-on's request. Although the victim in this case narrowly escaped death and returned to normal life, she still suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. It wasn't just physical wounds, but also an enduring trauma from being so close to death. While Young Suk-on miraculously survived the abuse by her husband and faced the brink of death, the psychological aftermath profoundly affects her life. Story 3. This story takes place in South Carolina, located in the southeastern United States, bordering the North Atlantic Ocean. In the northern part of the state, there's an artificial lake called Lake Wylie. Surrounding this lake are many luxurious villas, including one owned by a man named Steve Clayton. He became a millionaire at a young age through his entrepreneurial success. At 62, he moved into a lakeside villa with his wife Lana, who was 11 years younger than him. Although they had no children, their life was very happy and prosperous. They lived peacefully in this lakeside villa for 2 years, until one afternoon in 2018, when Steve was found collapsed at the bottom of the stairs inside their home. On Saturday, July 21, 2018, at 11 a.m., Lana, aged 53, went upstairs to the bedroom on the second floor. Her husband, Steve, aged 64, was sleeping in bed. Recently, his health had not been good, so Lana took meticulous care of him, placing various medications and necessities on the small table next to the bed for easy access. As noon approached, Steve was still in deep sleep while Lana left the bedroom to mow the lawn. Around noon, as Lana was about to go back inside to rest, she found Steve lying face down on the ground floor, right next to the stairs. She panicked, ran outside to ask someone to call 911, and when neighbors came back with her to the scene, they discovered Steve had already passed away. At that moment, Lana was engulfed in grief and self-blame, thinking she shouldn't have left him alone. If she had stayed by his side, perhaps this tragedy could have been prevented. Steve was 64, born in Florida, and among his many siblings, he had the best relationship with his sister, Rosie. At the age of 20, Steve founded his own company, specializing in physical therapy for sports injuries, achieving great success. He enjoyed collecting art, playing golf, and boating. At 41, he retired to enjoy a more leisurely life. He was always concerned about his family and was very close to his 2 nephews, Nick French and Chris Fagan. At the end of 2009, when he was 57, Steve left his hometown in Florida to move to South Carolina. In his second year there, he met Lana, who was 11 years younger than him, through the internet. Lana was a nurse from Oklahoma, known for her gentle and quiet demeanor. They quickly fell in love. 3 years later, Steve and Lana got married. Though it wasn't the first marriage for either of them, they still received many blessings from friends and family. In 2016, they moved into a villa by Lake Wylie. Lana was amicable, while Steve was enthusiastic and cheerful, even sharing his business experiences with the local youth. Everyone around them cherished this couple. On the afternoon of the incident, news of Steve's sudden death spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. Nick French, Steve's nephew, who was a police officer in a nearby town, arrived promptly. The police found no injuries or bruises on Steve's body, but his face was pale. The forensic pathologist concluded that Steve died of a heart attack. Nick French felt suspicious about this conclusion. Indeed, Nick was an experienced investigator. He checked Steve's pockets, but found no phone, which was unusual because Steve always carried it with him. He called his Aunt Rosie to inform her of the tragic news, and asked if she had been in recent contact with Steve. Rosie said she hadn't been in contact with Steve for 3 days, which was odd since they usually texted each other frequently. While on the phone, Nick French observed the second floor. As part of his professional routine, he inspected the bedroom meticulously and noticed the bed was very messy, with the mattress thoroughly wet. Although Steve was a clean person, this condition indicated his health was very poor, and he had lost the ability to care for himself. Nick French, being close to Steve, knew that since June of that year, Steve's health had begun to decline. Initially, Steve only complained of ear pain, followed by nausea and dizziness. The family was worried and advised him to see a doctor, but Steve said he was too tired and just needed rest. Since Lana was an experienced nurse, the family felt reassured leaving Steve in her care. However, there was an incident during this time. One day, Lana told everyone that Steve was sleeping very deeply, not waking up even after calling him, and he had slept for 36 hours straight before waking up. After this unusually long sleep, Steve's spirits improved significantly. On July 4th, he organized a party and danced happily with the family. Everyone thought he had recovered, but unexpectedly, just 2 weeks later, his health deteriorated rapidly. After finishing the call, Nick French returned to the living room and questioned Lana. Lana recounted that after the early July party, Steve began feeling unwell, and in the last 3 days, his condition had deteriorated significantly. He was frequently dizzy and exhausted. However, he didn't want to go to the hospital, preferring to rest in bed. Lana didn't disclose this fully because she didn't want to worry everyone. Regarding the messy state of Steve's bed, Lana said she hadn't noticed and hadn't yet changed the sheets. She planned to take him to the hospital for a checkup, but it was too late. As night fell, other relatives of Steve arrived one by one to discuss funeral arrangements. Lana suggested cremating Steve soon so he could rest in peace and avoid body decomposition, but Rosie remembered that her brother had expressed a wish to be buried in a cemetery in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which was also stated in his will. Steve's nephew, Chris Fagan, confirmed that there was indeed a will, specifying how his affairs should be handled, and he was the executor. Thus, they needed to find that will. Lana was surprised to hear this because she was Steve's wife, yet knew nothing about the will, not even where it was kept. Nick French felt the situation was not straightforward. He didn't believe that Steve, after being bedridden for 3 days, could have made it down the stairs on his own. He suggested they should examine the body to determine the cause of death. Most people agreed, except for Lana, who opposed it. She said Steve had a habit of using illicit substances, and an examination could damage his reputation. She argued there was no need to delve into everything since Steve was already dead. Nick French and Chris Fagan found this explanation puzzling since, to their knowledge, Steve had no such bad habits. On August 4th, they held Steve's funeral. During the funeral, Chris Fagan and others mentioned the will again, but Lana still knew nothing about it, so the matter was postponed. Afterward, Nick French drove to Chris Fagan's house to discuss Steve's death. Nick French noted that despite Steve's health being very poor, Lana hadn't told anyone or taken him to see a doctor, which seemed unreasonable. Moreover, when the incident occurred, even though there was a phone in the house, Lana didn't call 911, but ran outside to find help. Steve's phone was still missing. When it came to examining the body, Lana insisted on immediate cremation. When Chris Fagan called Lana to help find the will, she responded, "Don't come here. This is my house, and he was my husband. I'll handle everything." Then she hung up. After their conversation, both Nick French and Chris Fagan concluded that the case was not simple. Subsequently, Nick French visited some of Steve's neighbors to ask if they had noticed anything unusual recently, but they all said nothing seemed off. Although they hadn't seen Steve in a few days, Lana had told them he was resting at home due to illness. Nick French then went to the nearby hospital to see if there were any medical records for Steve, but found none. Despite not having any specific information, Nick French felt something was off. He contacted Chris Fagan, and they called Aunt Rosie to seek her opinion. Rosie also began to doubt Lana. Initially, she trusted that Lana would take good care of Steve, but the messy state of the bedroom raised her suspicions. After discussion, they decided to request a forensic autopsy on Steve's body. However, this needed to be done urgently since Lana had already arranged for cremation at the funeral home. They contacted the police to prevent the cremation and proceed with the autopsy. Everyone understood the situation, but didn't inform Lana. On August 29th, the autopsy results showed that Steve's heart had no issues, and he showed no reaction to any medication. However, there was a high concentration of a chemical compound in his blood, commonly found in eye drops. This substance, when used in the eyes, can reduce eye redness, but when ingested, it can cause dizziness, vomiting, respiratory depression, reduced heart rate, and potentially death. This revelation shocked Nick French and everyone involved. The next day, the police informed Lana that a high level of a chemical substance was found in Steve's system. Lana explained that this could be from the eye drops. For the past 2 years, Steve had almost every morning put 2 drops of eye drops into his coffee. He did this because a friend told him it helped with constipation. While this was true, the laxative effect was only a side effect of using a small amount of eye drops. The police stated they would formally interrogate Lana. During the interrogation, they learned that for many years, Steve made his own coffee, but due to his recent poor health, Lana had been helping him prepare it. Usually, only the 2 of them were at home. The police suspected that Lana had deliberately given Steve a large dose of eye drops. Feeling suspected, Lana added that Steve had been using this method for a long time, and it genuinely helped with his constipation. She only added a few drops which weren't harmful. The suspicion from the police angered Lana, and she firmly stated that she was innocent of any crime. After calming down, the police continued asking some questions, but Lana insisted she was not involved, and mentioned that in the last 2 to 3 years, Steve's mental state was poor, often scolding her and showing suicidal tendencies. Lana said she felt exhausted and wanted to go home, so the interrogation ended there. A police officer drove her home. After arriving, as the officer was about to leave, Lana began to confide about the days Steve was bedridden before his death. During that time, Steve was seriously ill, almost unable to move. Lana had temporarily stopped working to care for her husband wholeheartedly. Sometimes Steve couldn't control his body and defecated in bed. Each time, Lana would clean up by herself and help him wash. Each time this happened, Steve would scold and insult her. Although this condition only lasted a few days, it was too much for Lana to bear. The officer listened silently to see if she had more to say. After a while, in a moment of breakdown, Lana said, "You know, I had a small table by his bed with tissues, a urine bottle, and his drinking water. Seeing those things, I was so angry that I poured the entire bottle of eye drops into it." Hearing this, the officer was shocked. Lana had poured the eye drops into Steve's drinking water while he was deeply asleep. As a result, when Steve drank the water, he felt difficulty breathing and tried to seek help, but suddenly stopped breathing, fell down the stairs, and the autopsy results were consistent with this scenario. She only intended for Steve to have diarrhea and suffer a bit, but she didn't expect it to cause such a tragedy. After this, the officer left and reported back to his superiors. The next day, the police went to Lana's house to arrest her, but she was in the hospital. The reason was that the night before, after the officer left, Lana immediately wrote a suicide note. She felt remorse for not intentionally murdering her husband, and then took a large dose of sleeping pills to end her life. The next morning, when neighbors visited, they noticed something was wrong and called for emergency services. After being treated by doctors, Lana was out of danger. After Lana's arrest, a neighbor told Nick French that on the day after Steve's incident, he saw Lana burning something in the yard. Fearing a fire, he tried to stop her. After learning about this, Nick French and Chris Fagan went to Lana's yard to investigate, but only found a pile of ashes with some unburnt pieces of paper. They realized these were pages from Steve's diary, which could have served as a will, as the document was thick enough not to burn completely. News of Lana's arrest spread quickly, and people couldn't believe she could do this to her husband. In the eyes of everyone, the couple seemed happy, with Steve loving his wife deeply, so they couldn't understand why he met such a grim fate. As the police dug deeper, the truth about Steve's death gradually came to light. 3 years after marrying Steve, Lana had convinced him to buy a villa worth nearly $1 million by the lake. Although Lana didn't want to reveal the reason for the move, the police were quick to notice that in this location, there was a law stating that if a spouse dies without a will, Then the surviving spouse could inherit all the assets, without having to share with anyone else. Therefore, the police suspected that Lana's real motive was to seize Steve's assets. Her insistence that there was no will was because, according to the will, the property would be divided among others, particularly Steve's nephews, Chris Fagan and Nick French. During the investigation, the police also discovered that 2 years before the incident, Steve had an accident at home. At that time, Steve had a collection of art, including an intricate crossbow. It was kept in a cabinet, and he would occasionally take it out to admire. One night, Steve woke up with a headache to find Lana holding the crossbow at the corner of the bed. He touched his head and found it bleeding, though the wound wasn't severe. Lana apologized to Steve, saying she found the crossbow interesting and wanted to try setting it up to see if it would work. But she didn't know how to assemble it, so she brought it into the bedroom to ask Steve. She didn't know why the arrow suddenly shot out, but fortunately, it didn't cause serious injury. Lana seemed remorseful, so Steve comforted her not to worry. It was just a small accident. But now the police thought that incident might not have been an accident. Lana might have intended to shoot her husband while he was sleeping, but lacking experience and feeling nervous, failed. So this time, she wanted to send him to his death with a more sophisticated method. 3 days before the incident, Lana had added a small amount of eye drops to make Steve feel dizzy and weak. As the toxins accumulated, Steve's body weakened to the point where he couldn't move. His will to live helped him crawl out of bed on the day of the incident. Without a phone, he could only go downstairs. Steve's mobile phone was missing. Lana said Steve had thrown his phone into the lake 3 days before the incident, thus preventing family from contacting him. Combining this with the above investigation results, the police suspected that Lana had planned to assassinate her husband with the aim of taking all his assets. However, Lana claimed it was an impulsive act out of anger, not with the intent to murder Steve. She also recounted that as a child, she was abused by an uncle. After growing up, she joined the Air Force, but was assaulted at a military base. These experiences made her fearful of domestic violence, leading her to act out in anger towards her husband. However, the method of using eye drops drop by drop is not something anyone would casually think of, and this was not a one-time act, but a prolonged poisoning, indicating it was not a random intention, but a very deliberate, extremely malicious act. 2 months later, the case was tried in the South Carolina court, where Lana Clayton was charged with murder. She insisted she had never heard that eye drops could be fatal, and had no intention of assassinating her husband. In January 2020, the court sentenced Lana Clayton to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder, with no possibility of parole. About 3 weeks after Lana's arrest, another suspicious death occurred 19 kilometers away. The police believed it was possible the perpetrator had heard about the case and copied the method of poisoning with eye drops. What frightened many was that without the persistence of Steve's nephew and sister, Lana's crime might never have been discovered. Story 4. The story we're exploring now takes place in Osaka, the capital city of Osaka Prefecture, on the coast of the Seto Inland Sea. This is a significant city in Japan, known for its developed economy and rich history. Here there was a family of 4. The husband, Fujimori Yasutaka, aged 52, worked for a pharmaceutical company. The wife, Fujimori Mitsuyo, aged 46, was a homemaker. They had 2 sons, the youngest being 19, both attending university. The life of this family was quite stable. However, one day, the mother and the eldest son suddenly vanished without any clear reason, and no one could find them. It wasn't until 5 years later, when an item was discovered, that the truth from years ago began to unfold. On August 14, 2011, it was a Sunday. In Tennoji Ward, Osaka, there's an unnamed park known as Higashitatsu Park, just a 5-minute walk from Osaka Wahamachi Station. This park isn't particularly large. It features a wide lawn, where local residents relax in their free time. The park has no fences, and is open to the public for free at any time. At 7:30 a.m. that morning, at Higashitatsu Park, a sanitation worker was doing his regular cleanup. While sweeping, he suddenly spotted a metal box lying on the ground. Instinctively thinking it was litter carelessly discarded, he approached to dispose of it. Upon closer inspection, he bent down to pick up the box. What surprised him was how heavy it was, as if something was inside. Upon observation, he noticed the box was sealed with tape. Out of curiosity, the sanitation worker tore off the tape and opened the box. He couldn't help but jump back when he saw what was inside. The moment he opened it, a stench hit his face. Inside the box, a human skull was clearly visible. Frightened, the sanitation worker quickly threw the box down and ran a few meters away. After calming down, he hurriedly took out his mobile phone to call the police. A few minutes later, a large number of police officers arrived at Higashitatsu Park, where the incident occurred. The area was temporarily cordoned off, and an investigation of the scene commenced immediately. This metal box was 24 centimeters long, 35 centimeters high, with a capacity of about 18 liters. In Japan, an Edokin has a capacity of around 18 liters, so this case is also referred to as the Edokin case in Japan. On the metal box, there was a label with the name of a pharmaceutical company. Inside the box, besides a skull, they found an ankle bone fragment. The lid of the box was wrapped with multiple layers of vinyl tape. This type of tape is commonly used for corrosion protection, moisture resistance for pipes, and electrical insulation for wires. Given the metal box was already quite sealed, the additional tape around the lid seemed intended to keep the foul odor inside. Clearly, this was a murder case. Currently, with just a few bone fragments, it's difficult to identify the victim. Meanwhile, the police questioned the person who reported the incident. He stated to the police that he was a sanitation worker at Higashitatsu Park, sweeping the park every morning, handling some recyclable waste. That morning, he saw the metal box in the grass. He intended to pick it up to sell it for money, then open the metal box. The sanitation worker further reported that that morning, there were a few people in the park doing their morning exercises, but he didn't see anyone suspicious. Some locals told the police that when they came to the park for their morning exercise, they had seen the metal box, but they didn't know when it appeared there, and they paid no attention to it. To gather more clues, the police expanded their search around the area, centering on Higashitatsu Park. As a result, at 2 p.m. that day, on Kitanocha-suji Higashitatsu Street, not far from the park, they found a second metal box. Compared to the first, this one seemed older, showing more rust. When opened, it contained some wrist bone fragments. The next day, a local resident reported to the police that they had found a third metal box in a parking lot, 100 meters west of the park, at the address February 8, 10 Higashitatsucho. Upon receiving the report, the police quickly arrived at the scene. Inside the metal box were several ankle bone fragments. The second and third boxes were not sealed with tape, but their size and style matched the first one, suggesting they were likely discarded by the same person. Not long after, the autopsy results were available. DNA tests showed that the remains in the three metal boxes belonged to two different people, one male and one female, who were mother and son. Since only parts of their remains were found, the cause of death couldn't be determined. However, the time of death was established to be around 2006, roughly 5 years earlier. The police compared the information of the two victims with data on recent missing persons in Osaka, and the results confirmed their identities as Fujimori Mitsuyo, aged 46, and Fujimori Yasuyo, aged 21. According to records, they had gone missing in April 2006, over 5 years ago. Rewinding to May 2006, Fujimori Yasutaka, anxious, reported to the police station that his wife and eldest son had disappeared the previous month. He suspected they had left home. There was still a younger son at home. Grieving for his young child, he was pained at the thought of his son growing up without his mother and brother. Upon investigation, it was found that Fujimori Yasutaka and his wife met and fell in love during university. After graduation, they introduced each other to their families and quickly got married, living in an apartment in Osaka. After his father's death, Fujimori Yasutaka inherited a printing company with a decent monthly income. His wife, after getting pregnant, quit her job to focus on her pregnancy. Later, they had a second child. Life for the family of four was joyful and happy. However, this happiness didn't last long. The printing company went bankrupt due to poor business. To support his family, Fujimori Yasutaka had to find another job. He then worked for a pharmaceutical company as a department head. Although his income was not bad, it couldn't compare to what he had before. Gradually, his wife complained that he wasn't earning enough to cover family expenses. They argued several times over this. After one argument, she threatened to leave because she felt he was too useless, unable to provide for the family. Initially, Fujimori Yasutaka thought she was just joking, but to his surprise, she actually left, taking their eldest son with her. He didn't know where she'd go, and all calls went unanswered. He searched everywhere she might have gone to, but found no trace. In despair, he began to suspect that she might have had another man before, thus taking their son and running away with her lover. Fujimori Yasutaka further told the police that his wife often chatted online with a strange man. Due to his work, he came home late every day, so he thought she was just lonely at home and seeking online companionship. Reflecting now, he believes she might have been having an affair at that time. At first, he still hoped she would return, thinking it was just a momentary impulse that made her leave. He didn't expect more than a month to pass without any news. Now, with no other options, he went to the police station to report the disappearance, hoping the police could find his wife and son. After getting a rough idea of the situation, the police continued to interview the couple's youngest son. He reported that the atmosphere at home was bad, with his parents often arguing about money. His brother always sided with their mother, criticizing their father. He wasn't surprised about his mother taking his brother away, since she favored him more. That day he was on a school outing, so he didn't know exactly when they left the house. Afterwards, the police went to the Fujimori residence for an investigation and found that most of the clothes of the missing individuals were gone, suggesting they had indeed left home. They checked nearby surveillance cameras, but unfortunately there were blind spots, and no footage of the two before or after their disappearance was captured. Neighbors and friends of the missing individuals all said they knew nothing about it. No one knew where they had gone. The police once suspected Fujimori Yasutaka, but due to lack of evidence the case fell into oblivion. Fujimori Yasutaka later moved away. No one expected that, 5 years later, the missing mother and son would appear in metal boxes. A witness told the police that a few days earlier, they had seen 3 men and a woman driving a small truck. The truck stopped at the parking lot. They threw a metal box into a trash bin and quickly drove off. The action seemed very suspicious. The police checked surveillance cameras in the park, parking lot, and nearby streets, but couldn't find the small truck. However, surveillance footage showed that on August 13th, the day before the metal box was discovered, a suspicious middle-aged man appeared in Higashitatsu Park. He was pacing back and forth, looking anxious. He was carrying a plastic bag, which the police guessed might have contained the metal box. After verification, they identified this middle-aged man, none other than the husband and father of the victims, Fujimori Yasutaka, aged 57. According to the investigation, Fujimori Yasutaka is currently unemployed, living in an apartment in Tanamachi, not far from Higashitatsu Park. This apartment faces the parking lot where the third metal box was found, just across the street. Fujimori Yasutaka had worked for a pharmaceutical company, the same one whose label was on the metal box. Based on the available clues, the police considered him the prime suspect. They speculated that he had emotional conflicts with his wife, and in a fit of rage during an argument, he killed her. The eldest son witnessed the whole thing, and to avoid being exposed, he killed his son as well. After handling everything, he went to the police station to report the disappearance to deflect suspicion. A month after the incident, he was arrested for disposal of a corpse. Facing questions, Fujimori Yasutaka claimed he didn't remember going near the metal boxes. 2 years ago, he quit his job at the company due to health issues and lived off monthly living allowances. To save money, he moved to his current apartment. When he had free time, he would walk in Higashitatsu Park. Many people went there, nothing unusual. About the metal boxes, he knew little. After quitting, he had never seen such boxes again. The police didn't believe his statement. Besides the 3 metal boxes containing partial remains, they suspected there might be more hidden in his house, so they went to search his apartment. This apartment building is 5 stories tall, with Fujimori Yasutaka's studio apartment on the 2nd floor, covering 20 square meters. The interior layout is simple. Upon entering, there's a hallway, the kitchen on the left, the bathroom on the right, and deeper inside, the bedroom and balcony. The police thoroughly searched every nook and cranny of the house, but found no metal boxes. Investigations revealed that Fujimori Yasutaka had become addicted to gambling in 2003. His wife had repeatedly advised him to stop, but to no avail. He lost all the family's savings. Later, he took out loans from the bank, only to lose them all as well. To pay off his debts, he intended to cancel the insurance policy they had previously purchased to withdraw some funds. However, during the process, he was informed that the insurance had been canceled long ago by his wife. Fujimori Yasutaka was furious and confronted his wife, learning that their eldest son had been expelled from university for non-payment of tuition fees for a long time. The eldest son was attending a private university, where the annual tuition was not insignificant. Since Fujimori Yasutaka's gambling addiction, the family had struggled financially. To keep their son in school, his wife had canceled the insurance policy. The police suspected that he killed his wife during an argument, with the tuition issue as the underlying cause. Therefore, he harbored hatred towards his son and killed him too. Out of fear of discovery, he dismembered both and placed them in metal boxes. After that, he quit his job and moved to his current apartment. Thinking that many years had passed, he believed no one would investigate further, so he casually discarded the metal boxes in the park, as if nothing had happened. 3 months after the discovery of the crime, Fujimori Yasutaka was arrested again for murder. This time, he admitted to disposing of the metal boxes, but vehemently denied killing his wife and eldest son. He stated that on the evening of April 10, 2006, when he returned home from work, the house was dark. Normally, his wife would have dinner ready by this time. Feeling something unusual, he turned on the lights and saw that the door to his eldest son's bedroom was open. When he approached, he found his eldest son lying motionless on the bed, with blood all over. A large hammer was at the foot of the bed. Seeing this, he was terrified and called out for his wife, but there was no response. Then, he found his wife in the bathroom, lying still on the floor with no signs of life. Upon examination, he saw she was holding a sharp knife in her right hand, and there was a wound on her left wrist. Losing 2 loved ones simultaneously caused him immense pain. He believed his wife had used the hammer to kill their eldest son, and then took her own life with the knife. The reason might have been despair over their current life situation. The police then questioned why he hadn't reported these events when he reported them missing over 5 years ago, and why he dismembered them and put them in metal boxes. Fujimori Yasutaka explained that at that time, his youngest son was on a school camping trip elsewhere, so he didn't want the boy to know this sad news. He secretly took the bodies to his company and used the company's electric saw for the grim task. After dismembering them, he placed the parts into 4 metal boxes and sealed them with cardboard. He used his position to hide the boxes in the company's warehouse. After doing this, he lied to his youngest son, saying that his mother had left with his brother. The youngest son completely believed this. 3 years later, feeling his health deteriorating, Fujimori Yasutaka resigned from the company. Upon leaving, he brought the metal boxes home. Subsequently, due to financial issues, he was forced to move to a smaller house. His youngest son lived alone elsewhere, while Fujimori Yasutaka moved into his current apartment and lived alone. However, the space in the new apartment was too limited to store all the metal boxes. Thus, at the end of that July, he disposed of the metal boxes in various places. He didn't expect them to be discovered so quickly. Fujimori Yasutaka's account seemed reasonable, but upon closer inspection, the situation appeared much more complex. First, after his wife and eldest son died at home, his initial thought wasn't to find the truth, but to hide the incident from his youngest son, which was quite perplexing. Second, he could dismember his wife and eldest son, which is not something a normal person would do. Moreover, he claimed to have put the remains into 4 metal boxes, but the space was not sufficient to contain 2 adults. Finally, he said he hid the boxes in the warehouse, which posed a significant risk and was bound to be discovered over time. The police wanted to question him further on these inconsistencies, but Fujimori Yasutaka refused to speak, maintaining silence and not revealing the location of the 4th box. Then, the police visited the pharmaceutical company, where he used to work to gather more information. His colleagues had mixed reviews about him. Some said he was serious and focused, working very carefully, afraid of making mistakes. He had good relationships with his colleagues, always greeting everyone. Many had a good impression, especially the company's president, who highly valued him. In 2006, after the president's daughter died in a car accident, Fujimori Yasutaka sent condolences upon hearing the news. This showed that Fujimori Yasutaka loved his family deeply, and he often bragged about his eldest son at work, calling him an excellent son. However, there were also colleagues with negative views of Fujimori Yasutaka, saying he had a bad temper, often got angry for no reason, and frequently talked to himself, appearing strange and incomprehensible. Additionally, he often came to work late, sometimes with the smell of alcohol on his breath. At first, kind-hearted colleagues asked if he needed help, but he responded with harsh words, causing people to avoid him thereafter. Next, the police questioned the warehouse manager, but no one remembered smelling anything unusual. Since Fujimori Yasutaka mentioned 4 metal boxes in total, and only 3 had been found so far, the police suspected the 4th was still in the company's warehouse. They conducted a thorough search, but found nothing. Afterward, the police visited the house where Fujimori Yasutaka and his wife once lived in Osaka, with the current owner's permission. Using luminol, a large area on the bedroom floor glowed. In the floor gaps, corners, and other places, they found bloodstains not completely cleaned. DNA tests confirmed this blood belonged to Fujimori Yasutaka's eldest son. Although the police made significant discoveries, to convict Fujimori Yasutaka, they needed more evidence. As the police were at an impasse, a woman named A, claiming to be Fujimori Mitsuyo's close friend, came forward with a clue. She told the police that Fujimori Mitsuyo had often mentioned her husband's gambling, how it caused her great distress, unable to afford her son's tuition, while her husband didn't care, only indulging himself, coming home late drunk, not even bathing before going to bed, and going to work the next day with alcohol on his breath. I continued that since Fujimori Mitsuyo and her eldest son went missing, her husband showed no grief and didn't actively search for them, even going to work as if nothing had happened. I found this very suspicious, considering him too cold-hearted. Fujimori Mitsuyo had complained multiple times about domestic violence, where her husband would vent his anger on her if displeased. I felt if he had impulsively killed his wife and son, it wouldn't be surprising. Later, the police visited residents near Fujimori Yasutaka's current residence. A pharmacy owner who had lived there for decades said she had never heard of such a horrific incident. Fujimori Yasutaka had come to her pharmacy to buy things, appearing very normal, engaging in conversation, and she was shocked to learn he was involved in this gruesome case. Another resident mentioned that Fujimori Yasutaka lived alone in his apartment, with his youngest son rarely visiting, so he was often seen walking alone in the park. He seldom spoke about his wife and eldest son, so people didn't know much about his family situation. The police then talked to Fujimori Yasutaka's youngest son for more information. He said his father was reclusive, so they didn't communicate much. Due to his busy job, he didn't visit his father often, so he never saw those metal boxes at home. Although he had suspicions about his mother and brother leaving home, he didn't investigate further, as his mother always treated his brother better. His father's monthly salary was limited, even later unable to pay his brother's tuition, but his mother found ways, even canceling the family insurance. Conversely, his mother never treated him that well. So when his father told him that his mother had left with his brother, though he was a bit sad, he didn't think much of it. The case then became widely known after media coverage, with many believing the situation was not as simple as it appeared due to several inconsistencies. Some netizens speculated that the real perpetrator might be the least noticed younger son. Due to his mother's favoritism towards his brother, he felt neglected from childhood, growing resentful over time. His mother canceling the insurance for his brother's tuition further fueled his anger, leading to the desire to eliminate both. When the school organized a camping trip, he saw it as the perfect opportunity, pretending to participate but secretly returning home. Since his father worked late, he decided to act then. He bought a hammer, found his brother asleep, and blinded by rage struck him. He then dealt with his mother. After committing the acts, he hastily disposed of the weapons and ran from the house. That night, when Fujimori Yasutaka returned home and saw his wife and eldest son dead, he was heartbroken and wanted to call the police. However, he received a call from his youngest son, who confessed the truth and hoped he would keep it a secret. Fujimori Yasutaka couldn't accept this immediately, but after some thought, for his youngest son's future, he decided to help cover up. Under the cover of night, he secretly transported the bodies to a desolate place and buried them. Then, he returned home to clean up the scene and instructed his youngest son to tell everyone that his mother and brother had left home. A month later, he reported to the police, lying that his wife and eldest son had gone missing. With the youngest son's statement, the police didn't investigate further. He thought everything was hidden, but unexpectedly, the burial site was chosen by a real estate developer for construction. When he learned of this, Fujimori Yasutaka dug up the bodies at night, dismembered them, and placed them in metal boxes. He then stored these in the company's warehouse. Since the bodies had decomposed into bones, the smell wasn't strong, avoiding detection. 3 years later, when he left his job and home, he took the after the exposure, He lied that his wife and son had committed suicide to protect his younger son, aiming to take the blame for him. Some speculated that after Fujimori Yasutaka's gambling addiction, he lost all the family savings, leading to his eldest son's expulsion. The eldest son, hating this, confronted his father, leading to a fight. In anger, Fujimori Yasutaka hit his son with a hammer. He then threatened his wife not to reveal this. After witnessing her son's death, she no longer wanted to live and chose to follow him. Sometime later, burglars entered their home to steal valuables, found the sealed metal boxes, thinking they contained valuables, opened them, and discovered human bones. To avoid trouble, they discarded them near the apartment and drove off. This led to witnesses seeing 3 men and a woman with a small truck, disposing of the boxes in a parking lot. After realizing the metal boxes were gone, Fujimori Yasutaka frantically searched, which was captured by surveillance cameras, showing him wandering around Higashitatsu Park and nearby streets with a plastic bag. As the case unfolded, Fujimori Yasutaka became increasingly suspected. The police arrested him again for murder. 2 years after the discovery of the metal boxes, in July 2013, the case was brought to trial at the Osaka District Court. Defendant Fujimori Yasutaka was charged with murder. In court, Fujimori Yasutaka denied the charges and pleaded not guilty. The prosecutor argued that the defendant's abnormal behavior of placing his wife and son in metal boxes could not be reasonably explained unless it was to cover up his crimes, though the specific motive remained unknown. Additionally, blood from the victim Fujimori Yasuyo was found at the crime scene, suggesting that Fujimori Yasutaka intended to kill his eldest son. Regarding Fujimori Mitsuyo, there was no evidence she was attacked before her death, so it couldn't be concluded that the defendant intended to kill her. Faced with the prosecutor's accusations, Fujimori Yasutaka remained silent throughout the trial. After some time, the verdict was reached. The court declared Fujimori Yasutaka not guilty of premeditated murder, but guilty of manslaughter. To this day, Fujimori Yasutaka is serving his sentence in prison. The apartment where he lived has been renovated and sold. Over the years, people continue to discuss this case. Whether he actually killed his wife and eldest son, and what the real motive was, perhaps only he knows the truth. Story 5. The story we're about to explore unfolds in the bustling Shibuya district, where the modern pulse of life intertwines with the timeless charm of Yoyogi Park. Amid the vibrant chaos of Tokyo, a luxurious high-rise apartment stands tall, home to countless families. Among them was a couple admired by many, the Sambashis. Sambashi Yusuke, a gifted financial analyst, always exuded elegance and confidence. By his side was Sambashi Kaori, a devoted wife who nurtured their cozy home. They were the epitome of an ideal couple, their lives seemingly brimming with happiness. But in 2006, a sudden tragedy struck, shattering the peace of their small family. What happened? On Friday, December 15, 2006, Shibuya Police Station received a young woman who arrived in a panic, reporting that her husband had been missing for 3 days and pleading for help in finding him. Sensing her extreme distress, officers calmed her down and asked her to recount the events. The woman introduced herself as Sambashi Kaori, 32 years old. Her husband, Sambashi Yusuke, was 30. She explained that in the early hours of December 12th, 3 days prior, her husband returned home drunk. After she nagged him, they argued. In a fit of anger, he stormed out. At the time, she was too upset to stop him. They'd had disputes before, but he always made amends first. This time, however, he didn't. 3 days had passed with no word from him. Fearing for his safety, she came to the police for assistance. From the information gathered, the missing Sambashi Yusuke was born in Kitakyushu and studied at Chui University's Faculty of Law. After graduating, he worked at a law firm in Tokyo, earning 1,000 Japanese yen per hour, about $8.50 in 2025. At a social gathering, Yusuke met Kaori, 2 years his senior, and an employee at Marubeni Corporation, a renowned Japanese company. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and they soon began living together. After a year of cohabitation, they married. Yusuke's modest income meant Kaori primarily supported the household. But 2 years into their marriage, at 29, Yusuke landed a job at Morgan Stanley's Japan branch as a financial analyst, earning an annual salary of 13 million Japanese yen, about $110,000 in 2025. With his increased income, The couple moved into a luxury apartment in Tamagaya 1 Chome, Shibuya Ward, near Yoyogi Park on the 10th floor. Kaori then quit her job to become a homemaker. Their life appeared idyllic, yet no one could have foreseen that a single argument would lead to Yusuke never returning home. Police contacted Yusuke's company to inquire about his whereabouts, but they reported he'd been absent for days, and they didn't know where he was. Just the day before, the company had promoted him to department head, but they couldn't reach him to hand over his duties. Suspecting the promotion might be linked to his disappearance, police investigated his workplace. They found Yusuke was well regarded by colleagues, with no apparent work conflicts. Next, police reached out to Yusuke's parents and acquaintances, but all said they hadn't heard from him in a while and didn't know his location. At around 8 a.m. the following day, Shinjuku Police Station in Tokyo received a report from an office worker. He'd found a suspicious plastic bag stained with dark red on a street near Tokyo College of Foreign Languages. Police immediately arrived and cordoned off the area. Inside the double-layered plastic bag was a headless torso, missing its left arm and right hand, with no lower body. The victim was unclothed, a man around 30 years old. The crude cuts suggested the body had been dismembered with a tool like a saw. Mud on the remains indicated the victim might have been buried before being dumped here. No items at the scene could identify the victim, nor were the missing body parts found. The victim's identity remained unknown. Forensic analysis determined the victim had died within the past week, though the exact time and cause couldn't be confirmed. The discovery site was near Kabukicho, a notorious red light district. Behind its shops, criminal gangs often operated. Shinjuku had seen many such cases. Dismemberment was a common tactic used by gangs to intimidate rivals and complicate victim identification. Suspecting gang-related conflict, police investigated missing persons reports from the past week. Soon, Shinjuku police noticed a report filed the previous day in Shibuya. Sambashi Yusuke, 30, whose disappearance aligned with the victim's estimated time of death. Shinjuku and Shibuya police then collaborated, visiting Yusuke's home for more information. Yusuke's wife, Kaori, provided details. He was 166 centimeters tall, slim, with a surgical scar on the right side of his chest. However, the Shinjuku victim had no scars, an 82-centimeter chest, muscular arms, and a tall, robust build. It seemed this victim wasn't Sambashi Yusuke. A week later, another clue emerged. Around 3 p.m. in Kamiyamacho, Shibuya Ward, a woman named Ms. A was walking her Shiba Inu. Passing a house's garden, the dog suddenly stopped and barked incessantly toward it. Ms. A tried to pull the leash, but the dog broke free, darting into the garden. Fearing she'd disturbed the homeowner, she hurried after it. The house was large but appeared long abandoned, its garden gate lock broken. The dog easily nudged it open. Inside, the garden was overgrown with weeds. 7 meters from the entrance, the dog barked and wagged its tail around something on the ground. Approaching, Ms. A turned pale with horror. A lower body, unclothed, emitting a foul odor. After composing herself, she shakily called the police. Shibuya police quickly arrived. Examination revealed the victim was male, with jagged abdominal wounds likely caused by a saw. Based on decomposition, he'd been dead about 2 weeks. The legs had soil on them, unclear if it was from the garden. Recalling the recent Shinjuku case, police suspected a connection. Forensic compared the Shinjuku torso with the Shibuya lower body. Through DNA and other analyses, they confirmed the parts belonged to the same person. The victim was tall and robust, likely 175 to 184 centimeters, with no external wounds or scars. Missing the head and key fingers, identification remained elusive. However, police noted a suspicious detail. The lower body was found just 500 meters from Sambashi Yusuke's home. Was this merely a coincidence? Initially, Sambashi Yusuke's wife described him as short and slim, 166 centimeters tall with a scar. Yet the victim was at least 175 centimeters, robust and scar-free. Despite the mismatch in physical traits, police still suspected a connection between the two. With lingering questions, police revisited Yusuke's home. This time, they noticed changes in the apartment. It was under renovation, wallpaper stripped, most furniture draped in white sheets. But, with the new year approaching, such home improvements seemed normal. When questioned, Kaori stuck to her original statement, insisting the victim's traits didn't match her husband's and angrily asserting he couldn't have been harmed. Police shifted their questions, asking if Yusuke had any enemies. Kaori claimed he'd never had conflicts with anyone, though he'd once accrued debt as a student due to a pachinko addiction. He later secured a good job and paid it off. She couldn't imagine who might hold a grudge against him. This visit yielded little, but investigators felt something was off. Next, they tried contacting others who knew Yusuke to uncover leads. Unfortunately, it was late December, and his friends and colleagues were reluctant to discuss troubling matters so close to the new year, a time to avoid bad omens, preferring to talk after the holidays. After persistent efforts, police found someone willing to speak immediately, Tanaka, 45, a senior colleague of Yusuke's. Yusuke had worked part-time at a law firm after university, where Tanaka was an associate. Tanaka had helped Yusuke land a job at a financial firm, and the two maintained a good relationship. Tanaka was deeply concerned about Yusuke's disappearance, and shared much about their connection. He described Yusuke as highly competent and outgoing at work. During the conversation, investigators had a sudden idea and asked Tanaka to describe Yusuke's appearance. After a moment's thought, Tanaka said Yusuke was tall, around 180 centimeters, had played American football since childhood, and had a muscular build. Police pressed further, asking if Yusuke had tattoos or scars, particularly on his chest. Tanaka recalled their trips to hot springs together, noting Yusuke had no tattoos or scars that he'd seen. After the interview, police quickly reviewed Yusuke's medical records and found no history of chest surgery. This gave them a critical lead. Yusuke's wife, Kaori, had likely lied. To confirm their theory, police contacted Yusuke's parents and requested their cooperation for a DNA test. Results soon confirmed the victim was indeed Sambashi Yusuke. Kaori had deliberately provided false details about her husband, significantly hindering the investigation. Reflecting on prior interactions, police recall Kaori's extreme distress when reporting Yusuke missing, seemingly genuinely worried for his safety. Yet, her actions, renovating the apartment while his fate was unknown, were highly suspicious. Police deepened their investigation into Yusuke's case. His home was in a high-end apartment complex with tight security. Entry required a magnetic card, and the main lobby had surveillance cameras. Investigators visited the building's management office, requesting card swipe data and footage from December 12th. They discovered that at 3:50 that day, Yusuke returned alone, stumbling as if drunk. After entering the elevator, he didn't reappear on camera. Police asked the manager if the building had other exits. The manager mentioned an emergency exit inside the management office, monitored 24/7, with any opening logged by the system. The door would auto-open during a fire, but otherwise remain closed. After checking, police confirmed the emergency exit hadn't been opened on December 12th. This gave them reason to believe Kaori had lied. Her husband likely never left the apartment that day. During the investigation, a colleague close to Yusuke, referred to as Mr. B, proactively contacted police to inquire about the case's progress. While police withheld details, they seized the opportunity to ask if he'd noticed anything unusual at Yusuke's home. Mr. B said nothing stood out, except that Kaori had once called the company's HR department to demand Yusuke's year-end bonus. HR declined, noting Yusuke was still missing and the situation unresolved. Police then reviewed the building's surveillance footage from the days following December 12th. At 10 p.m. on December 15th, Kaori, dressed in sportswear, was seen dragging a large suitcase out of the elevator. For hours later, she returned via card swipe, still in the same outfit but without the suitcase. 15 minutes later, she exited the elevator again, this time pushing a cart with a large cardboard box. 20 minutes after that, she returned empty-handed. From these clues, police traced a black taxi. The driver and trip data confirmed that at 10:05 p.m. that night, he picked up Kaori at the building with a large suitcase. She requested to go to Nishi-Shinjuku. When the taxi reached a street near train tracks in Nishi-Shinjuku, the driver, unable to ignore a strange smell, asked what was in the suitcase. Kaori immediately demanded to get out. Initially, the driver thought she'd take a night bus in Shinjuku, but her abrupt exit mid-journey raised his suspicions, though he complied. After viewing the footage, the driver confirmed the woman on camera was his passenger that night. This gave police grounds to suspect the suitcase contained Yusuke's upper body, discovered the next day. A month after the began, police returned to Yusuke's home, arrested Kaori for murder, and searched the apartment. Compared to their last visit, the home had changed dramatically. Walls freshly painted, floors replaced, furniture gone, except for a few clothes. The space was eerily empty, making it hard to imagine how Kaori had lived there in recent days. On the balcony, investigators noticed a long cabinet on the floor, its door removed and set aside. Inside, it was filled with black soil. They collected a sample in a sealed plastic bag. Forensic tests revealed it was common gardening soil mixed with a dark red substance. DNA analysis confirmed the red liquid belonged to Sambashi Yusuke. Based on the evidence, the apartment was likely the primary crime scene. Faced with overwhelming proof, Kaori finally confessed, recounting the entire incident. At 4 a.m. on December 12th, Yusuke returned home drunk. Kaori wanted to discuss divorce, but they quickly became heated and argued. Yusuke then went to the bedroom. By 6 a.m., as dawn approached, Kaori, still awake, felt her anger surge. She grabbed a wine bottle from the bedroom and struck her half-conscious husband repeatedly, only stopping after several blows. In his daze, she thought she heard him murmur why, before he went still. Once she calmed down, Kaori realized the gravity of her crime and was at a loss for what to do. Sure enough, at 9 a.m. that day, Yusuke's company called multiple times due to his unexplained absence, but Kaori didn't dare answer. The next day his colleague, Mr. B, called to ask if she knew Yusuke's whereabouts. She claimed ignorance. Perhaps sensing her somber tone, Mr. B offered to visit. Kaori felt terrified, but fearing suspicion, she couldn't refuse and reluctantly agreed, scheduling Mr. B's visit for the weekend. After hanging up, she began devising a plan. Since committing the act the previous day, her husband's body had remained on the bed in the bedroom. Though it was winter and the temperature was low, she knew the body would soon start to smell if left for a few more days. With Mr. B's visit looming, she decided she had to move Yusuke out of the apartment. Kaori, with her slender frame, couldn't move Yusuke's muscular body alone. After a failed attempt, she decided to dismember it. On the third day after the crime, she went out to buy a handsaw, a large suitcase, a simple cart, and a waterproof tarp. She also purchased soil. To avoid suspicion, she bought the gardening soil from 2 different stores. First, 8 small 15-liter bags, then 2 large 80-liter bags. With everything ready, Kaori got to work at home. She laid a cabinet in the bedroom flat on the floor, door facing up, lined it with the waterproof tarp, and poured soil into the bottom and sides, creating a makeshift workbench of earth. Once set up, she placed her husband's body in the cabinet and began the grim task. As the saw moved back and forth, the dark red blood seeped into the soil, sparing her much of the cleanup effort. When finished, she buried the parts in the soil to slow decomposition. That day, Kaori checked Yusuke's phone and laptop, discovering an email from his company announcing his promotion to department head with an annual salary increase of 2 million Japanese yen, about $17,000 in 2025. His year-end bonus would also be paid on the 9th of the following month. Seeing this, Kaori decided to report him missing, thinking she could later claim the money. At 9 a.m. on December 15th, Kaori went to the police station near her apartment, reporting Yusuke's disappearance with a worried expression. That evening, she dug up his upper body from the soil, wrapped it in 2 layers of white plastic bags, placed it in the suitcase, and planned to dump it near the train tracks in Nishi, Shinjuku. At 10 p.m., Kaori called a taxi. On the way, the driver noticed a strange smell, prompting her to hurriedly get out. She dragged the suitcase on foot, but worried the rolling wheels would draw attention, stopped after a short distance. Beyond the roadside greenery was the JR Yamanote line tracks, bordered by a steel fence. Lacking the strength to toss the bag over the fence onto the tracks, she left it in the greenery. She discarded the empty suitcase at a nearby intersection. The next morning, a homeless person found the suitcase. Returning to the apartment by taxi at 2 a.m., Kaori was too tense to sleep. She then retrieved Yusuke's lower body from the soil, placed it in a large cardboard box, and wheeled it out on the cart. Her earlier experience made her wary of taking another taxi. In the quiet night, the cart's noise was louder than she'd expected. Reaching Kamiyamacho, she didn't dare go further. After scanning the area, she spotted an abandoned house by the road, its garden gate unlocked and easy to open. She wheeled the cart into the garden, dumped the box, and later discarded the empty cart and box at a garbage site. The next morning, the white plastic bag in the roadside greenery near the tracks was discovered. A day later, police visited Kaori to ask about her husband's description. After they left, she dug up his head, still buried in the soil, placed it in a travel bag, and took a train to Machida, 25 kilometers away. Arriving after dark, she carefully avoided others, heading to a secluded grassy area in Saragaya Park. There, she dug a 35-centimeter hole and buried Yusuker's head. Back home, she disposed of the left arm and right hand, along with other household waste, in a low-traffic area near the apartment. Even after handling everything, Kaori remained uneasy and decided to thoroughly clean the apartment to erase any traces. On December 22nd, she scheduled wallpaper and flooring replacements and took a part-time job at a cafe to address her financial needs. During this period, many tried contacting Yusuke. His phone was flooded with missed calls and unread messages. On Christmas Eve, after her cafe shift, Kaori returned home and used Yusuke's phone to text his parents and some acquaintances, saying he needed time to rest and they shouldn't worry. In the following days, when not working at the cafe, Kaori busied herself with home renovations. On January 4th, she packed the bedroom's blankets, sheets, and mattress, sending them to her hometown with a note, "Please burn them for me." Looking at the empty room, Kaori felt calmer, but a lingering unease kept her on edge. On January 10th, she called Yusuke's company again, asking why the police hadn't arrested her. Based on her confession, they recovered the head buried in the park and the hands in the garbage. The bedding sent to her hometown was left unclaimed at her parents' old address. They had moved elsewhere. Forensic experts examined the head, finding 8 wounds from a blunt object. Concluding the cause of death was traumatic brain injury. When asked why the arms weren't dismembered the same way, Kaori explained that after cutting the left arm, she was too exhausted and handled the right arm more simply. When questioned about her motive, Kaori suddenly broke down, sobbing as she recounted painful events from her past. Kaori, born Kawaguchi Kaori in July 1974 in Niigata City, Niigata Prefecture, was the eldest of 3 children in a well-off family. Her father ran a printing company, Kawaguchi H. Kojo, and provided a comfortable life. However, her father was strict, especially with Kaori as the eldest daughter. To prevent her from dating early, he enrolled her in all-girls middle and high schools of his choosing. He frequently disciplined her, molding her into a poised and intelligent woman, hoping she'd become a flight attendant and ideally marry a foreigner. As high school graduation approached and the university entrance exams loomed, her father insisted she attend another women's university. This time, Kaori fiercely resisted. Her father had controlled nearly every aspect of her life, punishing her if she disobeyed, even forbidding her from crying when hurt. She longed to break free, but her rebellion failed. Kaori was forced to comply, enrolling in the English department at Shirayuri University, a prestigious women's university in Japan. Many viewed Shirayuri graduates as having an air of elegance. Her father was delighted when she was accepted, giving her a monthly allowance of 400,000 Japanese yen, about $3,400 in 2025, far more than her classmates. Though she couldn't choose her university, Kaori finally lived away from her father. With this money, she enjoyed newfound freedom, splurging on designer goods. During university, she also interned at Marubeni Corporation for a few months. After graduating at 24, Kaori followed her father's wishes and applied to be a flight attendant, but was rejected. Her father, furious, demanded she return home to find work. Kaori refused even after he cut her allowance, choosing to stay in Tokyo. To support herself, she worked as a hostess in nightclubs, continuing her lavish spending. During this time, she met a wealthy man in his 50s, the chairman of a company. He was gentle, attentive, and generous, giving her 2 million Japanese yen monthly, about $17,000 in 2025. For years later, he grew tired of her, ending the relationship and introducing her to the son of another wealthy friend. That relationship also ended after some time. Losing her wealthy benefactor, Kaori's lifestyle took a sharp decline, but she refused to settle for an ordinary life. She attended lavish parties, falsely claiming to be a full-time Marubeni employee to attract new opportunities. At one such event, 28-year-old Kaori met Sambashi Yusuke, 2 years her junior. They began dating and soon moved in together. Yusuke, unaware of her past, found her refined and told friends she was his destiny. The next year, a health check revealed Kaori was 2 months pregnant, but their finances were strained. Yusuke still had unpaid loans, and Kaori felt they couldn't afford a child, telling him she didn't want to keep it. Yusuke, however, pleaded with her, using all his money to buy an engagement ring, promising to find a better job and begging her to keep the baby. They married, but with little money, they skipped a wedding ceremony, hosting only a simple meal with close family and friends. None of Kaori's family attended. Shortly after the marriage, Yusuke abandoned the bar exam and worked for various financial firms. One day, he passed the final interview at a company, excitedly sharing the news with Kaori. She, however, revealed she had already aborted the pregnancy. From that moment, their marriage began to deteriorate. 2 years into their marriage, Yusuke joined Morgan Stanley's Japan branch, earning 13 million Japanese yen annually, about $110,000 in 2025. After saving some money, they moved to a luxury apartment near Yoyogi Park. Though their living standards improved, their relationship remained cold. By chance, Yusuke discovered Kaori's affair. Enraged, he confined her at home for 2 days, subjecting her to verbal abuse and cutting off her credit cards. Kaori eventually escaped to her parents' home for help, but her father coldly blamed her, saying she deserved her situation and must deal with it herself. With no other choice, Kaori temporarily stayed with her lover, referred to as Mr. Days later. Yusuke tracked her down, assaulted her, and broke her nose. Mr. C called the police, and Kaori was taken to a shelter for protection. Many urged her to divorce, and she secretly began planning to do so. Mr. C, a lawyer, advised her, helping her draft an agreement stating that if marriage later failed due to Yusuke's fault, he'd pay her at least 36 million Japanese yen, about $305,000 in 2025. Mr. C explained that, despite Kaori's infidelity causing the domestic abuse, if Yusuke signed the agreement, it would legally signify reconciliation. If Yusuke later abused her again or cheated, Kaori could claim the compensation upon divorce. During the subsequent reconciliation process, Kaori presented the agreement as Mr. C advised, and Yusuke signed it, but their reconciliation was superficial. Kaori began squandering Yusuke's salary on luxury items. While Yusuke increasingly avoided coming home, their marriage steeped in tension. Noticing Yusuke's absence, Kaori secretly hired a private investigator to follow him. After a few months, she learned he was also having an affair. The investigator provided photos of Yusuke with his lover. Kaori held off acting, gathering more evidence to file for divorce and claim her compensation. By December 2006, the investigator gave Kaori audio recordings of Yusuke speaking tenderly with his lover about their future. The words ignited Kaori's fury, solidifying her resolve to divorce. At 4 a.m. on December 12th, after a date with his lover, Yusuke returned home drunk. Kaori confronted him, presenting the evidence and demanding a divorce. Yusuke, enraged, tore up the photos, claiming he had proof of Kaori's affair with Mr. C, and vowing she'd get nothing in a divorce. He then went to the bedroom and fell asleep. His words drove Kaori to a breaking point, leading to her subsequent crime. A year after Sambashi Yusuke's murder, the case went to trial at the Tokyo District Court. Kaori faced charges of murder, disposal of a body, and related crimes. At trial, she admitted her guilt. Her defense argued she had endured domestic abuse, suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, experienced hallucinations, and lacked criminal responsibility at the time of the crime. The prosecution sought a 20-year prison sentence. Yusuke's father testified, demanding a life sentence for Kaori. The trial spanned 14 hearings over 5 months, concluding with a verdict. Kaori was guilty of murder. The defense disagreed and appealed. In June 2010, the Tokyo High Court upheld the original sentence. And so, today's case comes to a close. Story 6. In 2023, a shocking case unfolded in Taiwan involving a young man who inherited a massive fortune worth 500 million new Taiwan dollars, approximately 15.9 million US dollars, exposing a web of inheritance disputes and family scandals. The revelations included a father-in-law's illicit relationship with his daughter-in-law, an extramarital affair leading to a child, and even a same-sex marriage. To protect the victim's identity, Taiwanese media referred to the 18-year-old as Lai, and we'll use the same name here. When Lai was just 2, his grandfather, a tycoon with a billion TWD fortune, began transferring over 30 properties into his name. By the time Lai turned 18, legally an adult, his grandfather passed away, leaving him an estate valued at over 500 million new Taiwan dollars. If Lai's life had followed this script, Even if he couldn't become a notorious playboy like Wang Sisong, he could have lived a life of luxury, a real estate mogul free from financial worries. But no one could have predicted that, before the 500 million fortune could even settle in his hands, tragedy struck. At noon on May 4, 2023, police in Beidown District, Taichung City, received a report of a young man lying motionless on the street, suspected of having a stroke or fainting. When police and paramedics arrived, they found no signs of life. After a closer inspection, they noticed a distinct dent in the ground beneath the body, likely caused by a heavy object falling. This led them to suspect he had jumped from a building. With no identification found, police gathered information from nearby residents and witnesses at the scene. The body was taken to a funeral home for preservation, awaiting a forensic examination. During the registration process at the funeral home, the owner suddenly recognized the deceased's face. After a moment of recollection, he realized that just days earlier, this young man had been there to bid farewell to his grandfather, the wealthy Mr. Lei Yi. At the time, Lai had carried the coffin as the eldest grandson. The funeral home owner immediately contacted Lai's mother, Ms. Chun, to confirm his identity. Upon seeing her son's cold body, Ms. Chun collapsed, overcome with grief, crying until she fainted. Within a week, her family had to organize 2 funerals, one for the elderly, one for the young. The successive tragedies nearly broke her spirit entirely. What she couldn't comprehend was that just that morning, her son had been healthy and cheerful, riding his newly bought motorcycle to meet friends. Yet, hours later, he was gone forever. The greatest shock, however, was yet to come. Before Lai could even be laid to rest, someone arrived with a marriage certificate, claiming the right to inherit his entire estate as Lai's spouse. Stunned, Ms. Chin examined the certificate and confirmed it was legally valid, with no signs of forgery. What she couldn't believe was the date of the marriage, 9 a.m. that very day, less than 3 hours before her son was found dead. The most staggering revelation of all was the identity of Lai's spouse, a 24-year-old man named Xia. Not only had Lai suddenly entered a same-sex marriage in a whirlwind, but a mere 2 hours later, he was dead, leaving behind a 500 million new Taiwan dollar fortune. The story unfolded like a series of explosions, each more shocking than the last. So, who was Lai's partner, the key figure in this case? It turned out Xia had ties to the Lai family. His father was a real estate lawyer who, over a decade earlier, had handled the transfer of the 30-plus properties Lai's grandfather placed in his name. During that time, Lai and Xia, being of similar age and sharing compatible personalities, grew close and became good friends. But how did their friendship evolve into a same-sex romance and lead to marriage? This shift baffled Lai's mother. In her memory, her son had always liked girls. Just a few months prior, he'd been heartbroken after confessing his feelings to a female classmate and being rejected, so much so that he sought help at the school's counseling center. If Lai's change seemed abrupt, Xia's story was even more unbelievable. After the incident, a young woman came forward, claiming she was Xia's official girlfriend of nearly 2 years. Friends, classmates, and even both sets of parents corroborated their relationship. This raised major questions about the true sexual orientation of both young men. Their marriage seemed almost like a farce. According to Ms. Chun, that morning, Lai received a call from Xia, who said he wanted to teach Lai about real estate and asked him to bring his ID for a meeting. But what was supposed to be a real estate lesson turned into a same-sex marriage registration. Without much thought, they rode a motorcycle to the registry office, not even bothering to change clothes. There were no formal outfits, no wedding rings, no flowers. Not even a proper witness, just a random stranger they pulled off the street. The witness later recalled that the older man, Xia, approached him and said, "We truly love each other, but don't have our family's blessings, nor can we find anyone to witness our marriage. If you support same-sex marriage, could you sign as our witness?" Meanwhile, Lai stood aside, appearing shy and silent. The kind-hearted passerby, a complete stranger, was moved by their story of brave love, defying prejudice, and signed without hesitation. And so, at 9 a.m. that day, they legally became spouses. To celebrate, Xia took Lai to his apartment, where they drank in honor of their union. But no one could have foreseen that just 2 hours later, Lai would fall from the 10th floor and die under mysterious circumstances. In terms of timing, Xia may have set a record for the shortest marriage in history, from single to married to widowed in mere hours. More crucially, perhaps, was his record for the fastest wealth gain. Since Lai left no will, Under the law, Xia, as his legal spouse, was entitled to inherit at least 250 million new Taiwan dollars, about 7.95 million US dollars. It's fair to say that, with such an enormous fortune at stake, some might not just bend their principles. They'd twist themselves into knots to claim it. And Xia wasn't the only one drawn by the allure of this wealth. While Lai's cause of death remained unclear, 4 other Lays emerged, asserting their right to a share. These were the biological children of grandfather Lai, Lai's aunts and uncles by lineage. All 4 claimed their father's wealth had been entirely transferred to their nephew Lai, while they, the second generation, received nothing. No matter how much grandfather Lai favored his grandson, this disparity was excessive, far beyond what favoritism could explain. But as the media dug deeper, they uncovered an even more shocking secret. Lai wasn't actually a grandson. He was grandfather Lai's son. Could this case unveil yet another family scandal, with grandfather Lai, in his old age, succumbing to desire and secretly having an affair with his daughter-in-law? Further investigation revealed that grandfather Lai and his official wife had 3 daughters and 2 sons. However, their second son was intellectually disabled, struggling even with basic self-care, let alone marriage and family life. Finding a spouse for him became a daunting challenge. To solve this, grandfather Lai paid an international matchmaking service to find a wife for his son. In 1999, he spent a large sum to marry an Indonesian woman. After the marriage, she received monthly payments from grandfather Lai. Though called a daughter-in-law, she was more like a hired caretaker for his second son. Yet not long after, she bore the Lai family a daughter. Driven by an intense desire for a male heir, grandfather Lai hatched a sinister plan to impregnate his daughter-in-law himself to continue the family line. The Indonesian woman fiercely resisted. After repeated harassment and unwanted advances, she was outraged, filing for divorce and taking her daughter to escape the control. But grandfather Lai's depravity didn't end there. Undeterred, he found another woman from mainland China, Ms. Chun, to marry his son. Ms. Chun stayed with the Lai family and gave birth to a boy, Lai, who later inherited the vast fortune. The affair between father-in-law and daughter-in-law came to light in 2006, when grandfather Lai's wife caught them in the act. She recounted returning home one day to find the bedroom door locked. Even from outside, she could hear shameful sounds. Suspecting something amiss, she stacked 2 chairs, climbed up trembling despite the risk, and peered through the ventilation window. The sight stunned her. Her husband was in bed with their daughter-in-law. Fury surged, nearly causing her to fall. Yet she suppressed her rage, enduring in silence. When Lai was born, she noticed the child bore no resemblance to her disabled son, but looked strikingly like her husband. After feeding Lai one day, she quietly kept the spoon he used and secretly took it to a DNA testing center, using his saliva sample. The results devastated her. The child had no biological relation to her, but was her husband's son. In other words, the man Lai called father was actually his half-brother, and the grandfather he knew was his real father. Betrayed repeatedly, she could no longer tolerate it and filed a lawsuit against grandfather Lai and his daughter-in-law for adultery. While awaiting trial, grandfather Lai decided to go all in, no longer hiding. He brazenly kicked his wife out of the house. This enraged his other children, those with normal intellect and health, who sided with their mother, condemning him as shameless and a destroyer of moral norms. One daughter sharply mocked, "My child calls you grandfather. So does the child you had with your daughter-in-law call you grandfather too?" Publicly exposed, grandfather Lai, in a fit of rage, expelled his children from the house. In the end, the vast mansion housed only his disabled son, the daughter-in-law he'd had an affair with, and Lai, the boy who was nominally his grandson, but truly his son. Perhaps due to being shunned by everyone, or swayed by his daughter-in-law's sweet words, grandfather Lai began transferring his entire estate and properties to Lai, then just a newborn. With undeniable DNA evidence, the court convicted grandfather Lai and his daughter-in-law of adultery, sentencing each to 3 months in prison and a fine. Both refused to plead guilty and appealed. At that time, Taiwan's legislative election was fiercely debating whether the criminalization of adultery was unconstitutional. The Lai case coincided with Taiwan's decriminalization of adultery, leading to the case's dismissal and their escape from prison. During the prolonged legal battle, grandfather Lai's disabled second son passed away in 2008. After his son's death, grandfather Lai and his daughter-in-law faced no remaining moral barriers. He even legally adopted Lai, officially changing his status from grandson to son to resolve the issue of legitimacy. He then accelerated the transfer of all assets to Lai, leaving his other children and ex-wife with nothing. This process, though discreet, continued for over a decade. By the time Lai turned 18, the family's entire fortune was in his name, making him a young billionaire. Only then did grandfather Lai feel at ease, knowing the wealth would secure Lai's future. And then, he truly found eternal peace. In late April 2023, grandfather Lai passed away at 83. Having completed the asset transfers beforehand, he successfully avoided a hefty inheritance tax. But no one could have foreseen that, just a week after his death, Lai would follow him into the afterlife. In the end, the 500 million new Taiwan dollar fortune couldn't escape becoming an inheritance. Reflecting on this, grandfather Lai's children sighed, "This is all the karma of the adults." The child was completely innocent. Still, they expressed a desire to let the past rest, no longer wishing to be disturbed by the ordeal. Beyond the sentiment of letting the deceased rest in peace, there was a more practical reason for their decision. Under Taiwan's civil law, the order of inheritance prioritizes the spouse, children, parents, and only then siblings. Moreover, Lai's siblings were half-siblings through their father, further lowering their priority in the inheritance hierarchy. Even if they fought for the estate and won, after deducting legal fees and lawyer costs, the remaining amount would be negligible. Thus, instead of wasting effort on a dispute, Lai's siblings chose to let go, seeing it as cutting their losses. However, the two parties most likely to receive the largest shares couldn't easily walk away. Since Lai had no children, under inheritance law, his fortune would be split between his legal spouse Zia and his mother, Ms. Chun. If nothing changed, they would each receive half. But Ms. Chun refused to accept this. She believed her son was not only deceived into marriage, but also murdered. Far from agreeing to split the estate, she wanted Zia imprisoned for taking a life. Ms. Chen's argument was this. Zia's father, a real estate lawyer, had handled all the asset transfers for Lai's family. He knew full well that Lai was a billionaire. She claimed he orchestrated a honey trap, encouraging his son to seduce Lai into signing a marriage certificate. Once the goal was achieved, they allegedly pushed Lai off the 10th floor. This theory was supported by a veteran forensic expert named Chao Desheng. With over 30 years of experience and more than 10,000 victim autopsies under his belt, Chao immediately spotted anomalies upon examining Lai's body. The first red flag was the landing position. If Lai had truly taken his own life, his body would have followed a small parabolic trajectory, landing at least 3 meters from the building. Yet, Lai's body was found just centimeters from the building's edge. However, other forensic experts offered a different hypothesis. They suggested Lai might have stood outside the balcony railing, jumping in a near vertical descent, or perhaps clung to the falling when his strength gave out. In such cases, the fall wouldn't follow a parabolic path. But there was a problem. A rain awning protruded near the 2nd floor of the building. If Lai had fallen vertically from a great height, the impact would have caused his body to rebound outward after hitting the awning. This would make the actual landing position inconsistent with a vertical fall. Considering Lai's height, weight, and the 10-story drop, a self-inflicted jump would have required the precision of an Olympic diver, a world champion, no less, to ensure minimal bodily trauma, with only a fractured wrist as the primary injury. Under the family's authorization, Chao Desheng obtained Lai's emergency and autopsy reports, identifying 4 major points of suspicion: 4 needle marks on the right arm, a dragging mark on the left wrist, a ligature mark on the neck, and bite marks with bruising inside the lip. Chao concluded these injuries occurred before death. The last 2 marks, in particular, are typically seen in cases of asphyxiation, suggesting Lai may have been strangled, then injected with a drug capable of paralyzing the heart. Once in a comatose state, the perpetrator could have pushed him from a lower floor, not the 10th, where Xia was. Neighbors on the 10th floor reported hearing no arguments or sounds of a struggle that day. Xia claimed that after sharing a few drinks, he went to shower. When he returned, Lai was gone, and he assumed Lai had gone home, thinking little of it. Curiously, when police arrived at the scene, they saw Xia among the crowd, but he appeared cold and detached. When asked if anyone knew the victim, Xia remained silent, showing no emotion for someone who had just lost their newlywed spouse. Elevator surveillance footage captured the two entering the 10th floor around 10 p.m. In the video, Lai scratched his head with his right hand, showing no visible injuries like those later found on his body. Meanwhile, Xia stared tensely at the elevator panel, the two exchanging no words or physical contact during the ride. Public pressure mounted, leading the prosecutor's office to release a new forensic report on June 6th. The report concluded Lai's death was consistent with a fall from a great height, with no evidence of murder. It also refuted each of Chao Diqing's points of suspicion. The official cause of death was severe trauma to the left, back from the fall, resulting in multiple broken left ribs, bilateral chest hemorrhaging, and significant internal organ damage causing blood loss. The report emphasized that, contrary to Chao's claims, the body had multiple broken ribs and torn organs with substantial bleeding. Additionally, police conducted over 1,000 toxicology tests on Lai's blood, all negative, even for alcohol. The needle marks on his arm were likely from 4 insertions by paramedics during resuscitation efforts, according to the forensic analysis. Similarly, the bite marks inside his mouth and neck bruising were attributed to the emergency procedure, specifically the rough insertion of an endotracheal tube. Police also found fingerprints, DNA, and scratch marks on the outer side of the 10th floor balcony railing, suggesting Lai climbed over but slipped, with no external interference. As for the perplexing landing position, police offered an explanation. The rain awning bore marks of a heavy impact, and Lai's back had 2 scratches matching the awning's sharp edges. Nearby tree branches were also broken, indicating Lai likely hit the awning, bounced off, collided with a branch, and was thrown further before landing near the building. A plausible scenario. Based on this, on June 21st, the Taichung district prosecutors officially closed the case, finding no grounds to prosecute Xia or his father due to a lack of direct evidence of foul play. Yet, far from calming the public, this decision ignited even fiercer debate. Many questioned the scene at Xia's apartment, where multiple glasses containing Lai's DNA were found, and Xia admitted they drank together. So why less than an hour later did toxicology tests show 0 alcohol in Lai's blood? No matter how high one's tolerance, the body couldn't metabolize alcohol that quickly. This led some to suspect Lai's blood sample had been swapped, resulting in completely negative tests for both alcohol and toxins. Another major doubt was the fall dynamics. Police claimed Lai hit the awning, bounced outward, and fell from the 10th to the 2nd floor with gravitational acceleration, yet his spine was undamaged, and a logical outcome. Most perplexing of all, why would Lai choose to end his life at this moment? He had just inherited a fortune, gotten married, and had a bright future ahead. If he truly intended to die, why leave no note? There seemed to be no motive or reason for such an act. Amid growing doubts, Xia and his father remained silent for over a month before issuing a brief statement to the media. They emphasized that public speculation didn't reflect the full truth, urging reliance on the judicial investigation's findings. They also addressed Lai's mother, noting her statement stemmed from a personal perspective and couldn't represent the true facts. Later, some reporters received a letter over 2,000 words long from someone claiming to be an insider familiar with the Lai family. The letter revealed explosive details. Ms. Chun had a prior theft conviction, preventing her from obtaining legal residency in Taiwan. To gain legal status, she married the Lai family's 2nd son, who was intellectually disabled. The letter further exposed her affair with her father-in-law. When the truth emerged, DNA tests confirmed Lai was grandfather Lai's son, not his grandson. Since Lai wasn't the biological child of the 2nd son, Ms. Chen's marriage to him was deemed invalid, nullifying her legal residency in Taiwan. Never having officially married grandfather Lai, she could only stay in Taiwan under the pretext of caring for her son. But after grandfather Lai's death and Lai turning 18, she faced deportation. In other words, whether to secure her son's inheritance or maintain her legal residency, fighting Xia and his father in a legal battle was Ms. Chen's best and perhaps only option. If there was a reason for Lai to end his life, it might stem from the family he was born into. The affair between his mother and grandfather had once caused a public uproar, making Lai a target of ridicule and bullying at school from a young age. He carried the lifelong burden of being the child born from an immoral relationship. After the man he called father, but who was actually his half-brother, passed away, Lai's mental state deteriorated further. Despite his intellectual disability, that man had been Lai's closest confidant, the only family member with whom he could be open without pressure. In such a family environment, money may have lost its meaning to Lai. Perhaps what he truly desired was escape from his mother's control. It's possible that after a few drinks or upon hearing subtle hints from his new spouse, he he made his final decision. Of course, this is only one side of the story from the informant. In the face of a fortune worth hundreds of millions of new Taiwan dollars, even the purest familial or romantic bonds can't escape suspicion and conspiracy theories. The latest update on the case is that, while the prosecutor's office declined to indict Xia and his father, they also declared the marriage between Xia and Lai invalid due to fraudulent registration information. This effectively nullifies Xia's claim to half the inheritance. Yet Lai's mother hasn't given up pursuing Xia's accountability. On July 3, 2023, she authorized her lawyer to request a reinvestigation of the decision not to prosecute for murder. On July 28, the Taichung High People's Prosecutor's Office reopened the case for further investigation, and it was resubmitted on August 4 after completing the documents. On June 28, 2024, the Taichung District Court found Xia guilty of falsifying documents in a sham marriage with a high school student named Lai, sentencing him to 1 year and 6 months in prison. The sentence couldn't be commuted to a fine, though it was still appealable. On January 23, 2025, the initial court rejected Xia's appeal, upholding the original sentence and proceeding with the trial. On February 3, 2025, Xia was officially detained to serve his sentence. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.